Scream 7. Huge success at the box office. Critically, not so much, but we are looking at another one of those famous film critic audience member divides, because I think the tomato meter has it like 33% critics at 78% audience as of this live stream right now. I saw the trailer. I did a trailer reaction to it a couple months ago when the teaser dropped, and yeah, I was not looking forward to seeing this movie, especially because A, it's Scream 7, B, it's 2 hours long, and C, I'd heard nothing but mixed to not great things about this movie. And famously, Mark, on your Spoiler Room podcast last week, after this is before that you had seen the movie, I made a prediction about how the film would open, its famous Scream cold open, and I said that if that came true, then I would get up and leave the theater before the movie really got going.
Did you buckle yourself in?
No, I decided, I paid my $2.37 because it was AMC discount Tuesday, and I had an Adam Tickets gift card, so it came into it was like
Nice.
$2. It's less than $2.50 to see this movie. Yeah, I was right. The cold open was exactly as I predicted, but I did not leave. I stayed for the entire thing. And Mark, here's where I need your help. I love Scream 7.
Okay.
Now,
good on you.
I need you to walk me through this, because I know you saw it. I assume you didn't care for it. I know you had mentioned that you saw this with your son, and he had big thoughts about it.
He was very adamant, about it. And I was kind of mediocre, lukewarm on it, but
and that's what I want to get into, because for me it's pretty great up until the third act, where things get a little bit questionable and sloppy, and then it has one of the worst killer reveals. I mean, that almost killed it for me. There's a 5-minute stretch in this towards the end of this movie where I wanted to jump out a window. I wanted to go find a window and jump out of it. But then I feel like it rebounded, because in all of these movies, there's the killer reveal, but then there's the killer fight where the final girl has to take on the killer now that she knows that they've been unmasked. I thought that was pretty cool, especially the resolution. Now, we are going to be talking about spoilers here. So, folks, if you haven't seen Scream 7, or you don't want to be spoiled, turn back now and come back and visit when you have. But we're just going to get right into it. Also, I'm going to do the comment reminder. We're going to be reading your comments and super chats and all that good stuff, but only if they are relevant and or respectful. Hopefully both, but just keep things nice. We like to be nice here. Unless you're trashing the movie, in which case, we'll take those on board for sure. But just a way of saying, if you're going to be just trolling in the comments or saying insulting things, we're not going to read them. So don't waste your time. Anyhow, Scream 7, Mark, I loved it. I don't know how that happened, except to say that you and I both really liked Scream 6, except for, again, the killer reveal, which was a big problem. So can you give an overview, a synopsis, as you like to say, of Scream 7?
Well, Scream 7 is set in the same world as Scream 6. We, though, are catching up with Sydney Prescott, who has taken life into a small town, and she's married, and she has a daughter. And the daughter is a bit rebellious. Go figure, it's Sydney's daughter. And of course, Sydney is still dealing with the fallout from the events of Woodsboro and her long history of seeming to attract serial killers and then dispatching said serial killers. There is references to the events in New York, but it's not made major. But
that
in any
was
case,
Scream 5 and 6, which
5 and 6, yes.
Neve Campbell didn't come back for those. Except
no,
I think she was in wasn't she in like a brief cameo
in
or something?
6,
and yeah, mm-hmm.
in 6 there was a brief cameo because Gail, who's been in all of them, made a phone call, I believe it was, or Dewey made a phone call to her. But in any case, so we have Sydney. She's trying to live a quiet, peaceful life. Her daughter is dealing with the fact she's the daughter of the famous Sydney Prescott, which some people remind her of. But her and her daughter are on the outs because Sydney's trying to protect her daughter from her past and not tell her the gruesome things that happened. And meanwhile, her daughter is like living in this shadow. Well, when serial killings start happening within their town, it doesn't take long for the Ghostface killer to be calling Sydney again, letting her know that he's on a rampage for revenge, and it's going to involve her daughter. And it doesn't take long before her and her daughter are on the run from a Ghostface who they lead you to be one thing, but you're just going, yeah, no. Of who it could be. It could be it's not. But in any case, as they dig further, they learn a few things about who this Ghostface killer might be. Gail shows up just in time to dispatch who they thought was the killer, but guess what? Yeah, it's centrifuge, so to speak. And we watch as
subterfuge.
Thank you, not centrifuge. Subterfuge.
Yeah, right.
I'm horrible at English. Anyway, as things escalate, Sydney leads her daughter to try to help protect herself from Ghostface. Meanwhile, trying to figure out who Ghostface is. And Gail decides to help as well. The gang's back together, so to speak, as they try to come together and prevent more of the murders of the young folks in town. And we see how that all comes to a resolution with a big reveal of a killer who you aren't going to expect if you've, depending on how many horror movies and how many of these films you've seen.
Or what your appearance on classic 90s actors who show up in random cameos are. Like, it could be, oh, they're a prime suspect, or, oh, I'm glad to see they're getting work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, okay, so it's basically the plot of the other Scream movies.
Pretty much.
There's a big focus on legacy. And from right off the bat, I mean, this movie is fascinating to me, partially because of the marketing. I mean, they let the cat out of the bag pretty early on that Matthew Lillard was going to be involved in the movie somehow, playing Stu Macher, who was one of the two killers in the first movie from 30 years ago. You know, him and his best friend from high school, Billy Loomis, played by Skeet Ulrich. They were posing as the Ghostface killer and hacking up bodies and quoting movies and all that stuff. But Stu got a television dropped on his head at the end of Scream 1, so he's presumed, rightfully so, dead.
Yes.
And Matthew Lillard does show up throughout the movie, and he's taunting Sydney. And there's a line from the trailer like, "I'm not hiding anymore, not this time." And so when you see Lillard on screen, he's got scarring, like significant scarring on his face from when, say, shards of a CRT monitor might have impacted his flesh. So that's pretty cool to see. But you're not quite sure, okay, is he Ghostface? Is he not Ghostface? The movie keeps ping-ponging back and forth, and the characters even kind of keep addressing, like, the guy had a television dropped on his head 30 years ago. How is that even possible? And then there's some cockamamie story about how the real Stuart Macher, his body was never buried. In fact, he became a drifter who wound up in a mental institution years later with amnesia. But then one day he cracked, and then he was checked out of the mental institution just as all these murders start happening. So there's a lot of puzzling and puzzlement going on. The killer reveal, which we're just going to dive right into it, turned out to be, again, two killers, technically three, because the first killer that you had mentioned was run over by the news van very early on in the film. So I'm always puzzled by these moments because the characters in the movie think the nightmare is over, but we, the audience, are like, it's 30 minutes into a
we still got an hour and a half.
Right. I'm always confused by the dramatic strategy there. But so this guy was from the mental institution as well. Turns out he was just a pawn of the two real killers, one of whom is a uh, facilitator at the mental hospital and an AI expert. And the head of the operation of the new Ghostface generation is Sydney's next door neighbor in her new town, who, and this is where I really need your help, Mark, because I was trying to explain this to my wife when I got home, and in my head, I'm like, oh, this movie is great. I can't wait to explain it. And then as I was talking, I'm like, I don't think this makes any sense. So Sydney's new neighbor slash best friend comes from an abusive relationship. She has a teenage son who's in Tatum, that's Sydney's daughter, who's named after Sydney's best friend from high school back in the first Scream movie who got killed in the garage door. So this lady has a teenage son, left the abusive husband, and has started a new life and is all about like positivity and supporting Sydney as she goes through her post-traumatic journey. She apparently read Sydney's book about the Woodsboro murders and drew inspiration from that to rise up and kill her abusive husband. I missed some dots there that connect her to, and now I've got to kill everybody else. Do you remember what the deal was with her?
And this was part of my problem with it, was the reveal. I think, we've talked about before how films, if they really stick the landing, you can kind of forgive the other stuff. And this one, the film, I was going along, I'm like, how are they going to stick the landing? And then when they stuck it, I'm like, oh, you've lost me. Sorry. Quite a bit. And the motivation is this is the weakest motivation out of all the Scream films, I'm going to say, because her motivation is, and the guard of the asylum, who we now realize was just giving a line of bullshit about Stu. We don't think, sorry, I didn't mean to swear, but he's just giving a line of BS here. And Stu really, he did die when he had a TV dropped on his head, but they both read the book. That's what helped them connect. And her motivation for doing this was to get to see the real badass Sydney, because she was disappointed that Sydney chose to be the quiet life. And when she got to meet Sydney, all Sydney wanted to do was move on and not embrace the badassery that she was forced to do over the course of 4 other Scream films.
Right.
And that was her motivation, was the fact that she was disappointed in Sydney for choosing the quiet life and trying to move on. And the crazy guy was just going along, the guard was going along with it because she convinced him basically to go along with it. He just was pretty much along for the ride.
Yeah.
And she was using him as a second, as a accomplice.
And you know what? I think I like the way that you explained it more than it was explained in the movie. Because I think part of the problem with a lot of these Scream reveals now, you're never really going to top the first one. I mean, Scream 2 was pretty good with Billy Loomis's mom, Laurie Metcalf, who, again, spoilers, folks, makes a cameo appearance in here, as does, I think, all the killers from the first 3 movies, plus we get a cameo from Dewey. They all show up in the climax right before the reveal as kind of AI doppelgangers of themselves to taunt Sydney as she goes into the old house. Now, the problem is when they reveal that it's the neighbor, she's crazy, she's wild, she's got a knife to Tatum's neck, and then Ethan Embry's the actor changed his name like years ago, so I always know him as Ethan Embry, but it's different now. They've got their scream blades like at a cross against Tatum's neck, which was kind of cool. There's a lot going on, and so as she's monologuing, I think my brain was so consumed with what she's the killer. This is what's going on, that I couldn't fully absorb what the motivation was. I like the motivation thematically because it kind of works into the reason that Sydney and Tatum have such a strained relationship is because and they underscore this a couple of times, particularly towards the end of the movie, but I think it's kind of a lovely theme, is that in trying to protect her daughter from, all that craziness of her teenage years and even into her college years, she didn't equip her with the tools to actually
Mhm.
become a strong adult. And I think that's what really caught me about this movie is it's not just about the references. Although there are a lot of references, it really is about the legacy of what Sydney Prescott went through and how that I hate to use the term generational trauma, but it applies here, how that kind of ripples and manifests differently in different characters. And what does that mean once people start dropping dead? I love the Tatum character in this movie because she becomes resourceful at the end, but she does not know how to handle a weapon or stand tall and be strong for herself. She relies on other people. Joel McHale, surprisingly, shows up as Sydney's husband, Mark, and he's a great character too. He's the town sheriff. He's
He's the
also
Dewey of the movie.
no, no,
No,
he's
he's the Dewey of the movie, as in the guy just takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Dewey
oh yeah.
just
Well, we'll get to that because that all circles back to the reveal, which again I think is a black hole that does a lot of damage to an otherwise pretty solid film. Because the Mark character, he's the dad, but he's also the concerned dad. And it's a dynamic we don't see a whole lot of in movies today or in sitcoms for that matter, where the dad is kind of like, especially when it's about, final girls or kind of legacy female characters being all strong and badass. If there's a guy in the picture, he's usually a dope or he's a dead meat within 10 minutes or he's not around. In this movie, he's a caring dad who's also the town sheriff, but he's also not an overpowering jerk. He's just a dad who's a cop and he really cares about his family. And he and Sydney, I think, have a great chemistry together in the few scenes that they have. And when they have to fight Ghostface together as a family, it gets really interesting. I got some Friday the 13th part two vibes at the end with Ginny and Paul taking on Tater Sack Jason. However, Mark does get attacked in the garage with those floating transparent construction sheets, billowing all about, and Ghostface attacks him, stabs him multiple, multiple, multiple times, and so he's dead. Until the killer reveal, where Mr. Mental Hospital Supervisor is ordered to go get the body, and he drags Mark out of the garage, and Mark is still alive. Now, I do like it's a give and take because I hate the fact that he's still alive because he's been in that garage for what, 2
But
days?
you like the character.
I no, it's not that. I like the character, but I also like how he factors into
Oh yeah.
the rescue where he's on the ground, he's bleeding out, and he should be dead by now. But he uses this utility blade that he has like in his, bat belt or whatever to help cut free Tatum's, duct tape legs while she's, tied up because security guard guy isn't paying attention and the crazy lady's monologuing. So it works really well. I just wish it's kind of like in the first Scream where Sydney's dad had disappeared from the movie,
Right.
like he went on a trip or something, but then he shows up at the end, but there's like the suspicion that he's a suspect as possibly being Ghostface, but it turns out he had just been kidnapped by the two killers. If they had just done something similar to that, I wouldn't have had a problem with it, but they clearly kill this guy off mid-picture.
Yeah, and the elements that you talk about that you really like are the reason why I gave this 2 out of 5. Is because those moments I enjoyed. I enjoyed the exploration of Sydney. I enjoyed it sounds odd, but I'm a horror fan. I love my horror.
What?
I know, it's a surprise. The things I liked the least about this film were the horror moments of this film. I liked the idea of Sydney dealing with trying to move on. I love these stories that we've been getting lately, over the last, well, now it's almost 10 years since the first Halloween came out, the Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis coming back, the 40 years later one. It's almost 10 years now, I think. I like these stories of exploring what has happened to the final girl after. And it's one of the things that kept me going with the Scream series is I liked watching how they handled, because we never usually got that in the 80s or whatnot. We got a one and done film, so you never quite knew what happened to your characters, or if they did do a sequel, it was such a convoluted way that either those people didn't last until halfway through, the next sequel, and they're handed off to the next cast, or you don't even get to see that, right? So I enjoyed the aspects of Sydney. I think Neve Campbell is probably one of the high points in this film.
For sure. Yeah.
She makes the most out of the writing that they do for her character. And I think if they had someone else in here, it wouldn't have been as good. I could have done actually without Courtney Cox, because I feel bad for her Gail character, because there's been very little growth for her character over however many. There's been some with her friendship with Sydney, but as far as her reporter angle, she's still the same Gail overall. And I was like,
Well, but that's what I liked about her. I mean, I think that because of everything pretty much having to do with the third act of this movie, she gets short shrift.
Yeah.
She's another character who got, really messed up in the last Scream movie, and by all rights should have died. But it turns out she recovered, and now she's helping out Sydney, but she's got nerve damage. She's got like shaking hands, and she has to take pills. And there's a great scene where, in order to draw out the Ghostface killer, Sydney finally gives Gail the interview that she's been wanting since the first Scream movie that Sydney has been refusing. So they go live on this TV show, which is another great angle. There's a local news reporter who he wants to make it into the big leagues, but he's clearly like in his 40s. So he never quite made it. And it's like, oh, I could finally have a career. That's kind of an interesting dynamic. But Sydney leaves the interview early because Gail pushes a little bit too hard. And then backstage, Sydney questions Gail about what would you think if I brought up, Dewey on TV? And I think her answer was great. And what happened after that was even better, because you see her go off into this corner and pop some pills, and she's shaking and kind of holding herself. And you can see that she really is bothered by this. But overall, her story, I think, is really fun, because she was kind of a hotshot news anchor. She was an author. She probably made a lot of money off the rights to the Stab movies. But she did get let go and is having to rebuild her kind of newscaster persona career on the internet. And she brought along the two of the kids from Scream 5 and 6, played by Mason Gooding and Jasmine Savoy Brown, who, I mean, I love them in this movie. I like their chemistry and their dynamic.
Oh, me too. I like seeing them.
They're like Scooby detectiveness. But what happens to them in Act 3? I swear they did the same thing with these characters in Part 5.
They did. And 6.
Okay, did they do?
6 for sure. He was literally like, that was one of the problems I had with 6, was he shouldn't have been surviving at the end. I think she was, the way she get injured, she was okay, but he shouldn't have survived with the injuries he sustained at Ghostface in 6. And they had him come back. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the character. I like these characters. I like the Gale character too. I just, it was one of those things where 2 of those characters should probably not be alive, and they once again get injured again. And I'm like, okay, this is the 3rd time we've gone through it with these characters that they've just barely escaped. I'm like, well, and the thing is, it wasn't needed, and that's part of my problem with it, which I'll hold off. But I just, that's.
Well, no, I definitely wanted to get into all your issues with this, but it's also, I think, a problem with the Scream franchise as well, because the way those characters are treated in this movie is consistent with how they treat other characters throughout the franchise, like Dewey. I mean,
Yeah.
how many times has he been? I mean, he's finally dead now, we think. But how many times was he run through, stabbed in every vital organ, and somehow survived up until the last film? It's consistent. The problem is it's one of the staples of the franchise that really needs to be let go of or do something new with, because even the way these two characters are dispatched, to the point where, oh, I guess they're dead now, he gets stabbed in the shoulder and then once in the back, and then she gets like a little slash across the belly and falls over. I'm like, no, that's no. I know we're leaving the bar, but their their story isn't over. There's no sense of finality. They could have at least done what they did with Joel McHale's character and have them get really messed up, and then at the end, it turns out they're, not fine, but they'll survive. But they had to show up in order to do the cute, like, "Hey, we're now the professional cameraman and the new news reporter" bit, which I thought was kind of fun. I don't know if you stuck around for the end credits, but
Yeah, I
they
did.
do the fake, not the fake, but they do their news reporting. They're kind of giving each
Mhm.
other crap about how
Yeah.
bad she is and how he's a terrible camera person. It's cute, built on chemistry, but man, the more I talk to you, Mark, the more I realize how much damage this small pocket of the third act really does to the rest of the movie.
And that's the thing is one of my main criticisms of Scream 7 is that it really relies a little too heavy for myself on the previous films.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be so bad if this was like Scream 4. If this was Scream 4 and you're relying on some of the previous films you see, okay. But we're 7 films into this franchise and it's a greatest hits. And don't get me wrong, some of the hits are great, but at the same time, I'm like, that's why I like the nuggets with Sydney and her daughter and dealing with legacy. And even though I said Gail really hasn't gotten an arc, I did like what they did with her in here. It's the first time I think we've seen some actual on-screen development with her character outside of being the headstrong reporter who's just going to salt the earth behind her in her mission. This is the first time we've seen it. So we do get some more in here with Gail that I did enjoy. They added those nuggets, but overall, she's it's still Gail. But all the other elements in here were just stuff that we've seen before in this franchise that you could tell they were putting in here as callbacks or references or just like winks to the audience. And I'm like, I want, give me something. That's why I liked 5 and 6 so much, because I liked the direction 5 and 6 went really well. And then they kind of pull a, not as drastic, but they still kind of pull a Rise of Skywalker with 7 for, I know, obvious back production style reasons, but they kind of fall back on their, on things rather than trying to drive things even more forward to new things, to where, yeah, we get these little nuggets with Sydney in it. But if you've seen the trailer, you saw most of the major action sequences in this film.
I'm going to disagree with you there. Okay, maybe the action set pieces, but one thing that I think the trailer did, on the one hand, it's a good job. On the other hand, it's a terrible job because it's not selling the actual product. And I think we talked about this possibly on your show. To watch the Scream 7 trailer, you get a feeling that there's like 4 people in the entire movie.
Yeah,
Because they show
true.
a lot from the
Mhm,
climax where it's like Tatum and Sydney running around downtown
mhm.
of their little town, or they're in the house and there's like the stabbing in the walls, which actually happens earlier in the film. But there's a lot more characters in this movie. There's a lot more action and kind of like slasher set pieces. And there's a whole thing in the bar where the friends get together. They're kind of ditching. There's a curfew in the town after some murders, and the kids are all like trying to figure out who's the killer or who the suspects are. And of course, Ghostface or Ghostfaces shows up to wreak some havoc. And there's some pretty gnarly and also sad kills in there. When I say sad, I mean like I for the limited amount of time that we get to know Tatum and her friends, I really, except for like the boyfriend and the neighbor kid, they were just kind of like weird and they had red herring just painted all over them. But the other friends, I genuinely liked them. I felt bad when they died.
I
The
liked
one
them
kid,
too because they all
uh,
felt the same. I
well, I mean,
didn't feel I had a hard time telling many of them apart because
they
uh
did look very similar. Yeah.
they they, uh, they all looked very similar, but even with their personalities, it was hard to tell which ones were apart because uh you know I,
Talk it out.
the first Scream film, we do have a group of friends, but we spend some more quiet time with those friends. You get a whole wonderful scene around the fountain talking about the impact of the kill of one of
Mhm.
their mates. You have one of them giving you the horror rules, which you end up getting in every single, which I really, I understand it's the trope and signature, but please, we're done. There's not that many rules to horror. Okay.
Well, and they kind of they
But
play with that in this one
they do.
because
They do.
Jasmine Savoy Brown's character starts rattling off the rules, and then her brother kind of shuts her down, like, "No,
Yeah.
we're not doing that anymore." But they end up kind of instead of slasher movies, this is more like a true crime
Right. Yeah.
meta slasher. Yeah,
They play more with the true crime aspect, but it's just you do kind of get this angle with it, but it's just the way it's written. It just didn't feel quite. I don't know. I think that's the thing is on one hand it's really great. Yeah, we're diving right into the horror aspect angle of it, but what made some of those earlier Scream films keep you interested and keep you connected to the characters is because you felt you could identify the people and their personalities because their characters really kind of stood out. Even the side character, you knew who was who and they all felt like unique personalities. When you get this group of friends together, they kind of feel like that, but I don't know if it's the writing or the direction with this. They kind of glom together as just group of friends for
well,
me,
yeah,
and for me that kind of took me out because I was like, okay. And then you could see where it was going to go in as they separate, you're like, okay, I see
right. But
where this is
I
going.
think I reacted, I think, more to these characters than you did. I don't remember any of their names. Except for Tatum and
Mhm.
McKenna Grace's character Hannah, who is almost the Drew Barrymore of
Yeah,
this
oh yeah,
movie,
no,
because
absolutely,
she's
yeah.
one of the bigger name young stars. She's been in the Ghostbusters
Mhm.
movies and Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and a whole bunch. Like, she's in every trailer now, but she's the first of the friends, I think, to
Right.
go in a pretty spectacular fashion involving school play and a
Yeah.
harness. Uh,
Mhm.
Wow. But, I think the core issue with this movie that they didn't have in 5 and 6 as much, because they didn't have as many adult characters to play around with because Sydney wasn't in the equation, is now you're mixing the adult legacy characters with a new group of teens with the college-age legacy characters from the other movies, and Scream 1, you're absolutely right. We got to know those characters because it was all just about a group of high school students. The
Right.
parents weren't around. They didn't factor in. The second movie was all about college, and the third one was like the Hollywood, the weird thing, but it was still about this core group of young people. You weren't trying to shoehorn in moments for all these different cast members from different generations. So, yeah, I understand. But I think, like, there's the one girl whose parents owned the bar they were in,
Mhm.
Chloe, played by Celeste O'Connor. She is hiding behind the bar. Ghostface is, on the other side, and she thinks she can get away, but he grabs her and does this. I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke, but it was like the old cowboy saloon thing where he drags her down the bar through all the glasses, the beer
Yeah,
mugs at the end,
and she
and
gets
then she gets slammed to the floor, and we think, okay, now he's going to go for the coup de grace, but he looks down and she's dead because a giant shard of glass
Mhm.
like pierced her jugular. That was a nice surprise, but it was also very sad. And then a few minutes later, the guy that she could have maybe had something with, the weird neighbor kid, he gets killed and his body gets thrown over right next to hers, and they're kind of next to each other dying, or she's probably
Mhm.
already dead. But it's also very sad. Now, the problem with the climax is this weird neighbor kid. He bursts into the bar just as she's coming out of the kitchen because she's just fought off Ghostface. And she's like, "No, don't go in there. He's in there." And he's like, "Don't worry. I got this. I got this." And he runs in, and then he comes out a minute later bleeding from the stomach. Now, I feel like this is a really clumsily handled red herring, kinda like a Billy Loomis thing from the first one where he gets stabbed and is injured, but it turns out he's gonna be a killer. No, he just, for whatever reason, decides, "Oh, you told me that the serial killer who's butchered our friends is in the kitchen? I'll just run in there and deal with him," even though he's like a basement-dwelling internet nerd. No. What
Yeah.
help me out, Mark.
No, and then and again, it's one of the other problems that I had with this film is the fact that one of the things that I think Scream really kind of prided itself for, kind of unspokenly, is that most of your main characters who end up eventually getting killed or whatnot aren't necessarily ones that just are victims. They fight back, they're smart, they do make some smart decisions, maybe not the best decision all the time, but they do make some decisions that you're like, that's a little different, that makes sense within the context, that it's not just stupid horror move by the people. And in here you end up getting more of these, and I understand they're young folks and whatnot, but still, just the way the series is written, most of them make dumb horror movie decisions, more dumb than you're used to kind of see that I'm used to seeing in some of the other Scream, films, especially for the characters that we spend a little time with. So you're right. And also, a beer tap doesn't work that way, by the way, folks. I don't care how sharp the beer tap is. The only way you're going to get the beer coming out of the mouth is if he actually shoved the head enough so that the spout goes through the head. Otherwise, the beer would have just ran down the back of the kid's nose and not come out of the guy's mouth like the gimmick joke kill that they did for it.
You know, Ghostface's physical reaction to that almost felt like on set that day they did it, and then he's like, "I don't think this is gonna work, guys," and they just left it in because he kinda hangs his head. He's like, "Mm."
He's like, yeah, I don't get it. So, and I think that's why I rated the film low. I'm not, and I would, 2 out of 5. I mean, it's watchable for me, but at the same time, there were just a lot of decisions in here made that felt like they were made because it's a horror movie, but Scream prided or at least tried to be at least a little bit smarter than the films that it was referencing for some of your characters. Like Sydney didn't need to stop running to talk on the smartphone to her daughter. I mean, she was looking at the video to see where she was at, but at the same time, she could have kept moving, and she did it. She just stopped. She could have kept going to where her daughter was. AI parts of this film, I really wish they hadn't worked the AI parts in it. And the only reason they did was so that they could red herring stew, because the AI parts felt like it was written by AI. I'm like sitting here going, and it's like, just like there's a scene in here where one of the young kids is into AI. And
Mhm.
so they throw in this red herring of, on his laptop, Tatum sees that he has a copy of him in front of a green screen, and next to him the Stu AI video that was sent to her mom. And so it's thrown out there that, oh, he might be the killer, because he's like explaining, well, I just wanted to try to recreate it. And I'm like, really? It's like it was thrown in there specifically for the red herring. And I think that it would work if any of their red herrings would survive more than 2 minutes after they're given the red herring treatment, because almost every person who you're like, oh, this could be the killer, within a minute or two, you're like, nah, nope, they're dead now. It's not
Well,
them. And I'm like, give it a little time to breathe if they're the killer or not.
And I think that goes back to, again, sort of the meta tropes of this series, because just because you see someone get killed on screen doesn't mean they can't come back. We
True.
going all the way back to Billy Loomis.
Yes. No, absolutely.
But I agree. I like the idea of the boyfriend dabbling with the AI to see if he could,
Mhm.
if he could create it, or prove that it was, fake, or if it was really Stu.
Right,
I think
okay.
that's a neat idea, but I also don't know that there's almost like this assumption like, oh, they're, teenagers. They know how to use AI and do that very specific thing. That guy doesn't seem like the kind of dude who's going to have a green screen set up in his basement to do anything.
Mhm.
I'm making assumptions here, but also, again, we talked about the hospital supervisor who's one of the ghost faces. He happens to be an AI expert, and yet he's been working at that institution for like since the early 2000s. I don't know. It just, again, press X for doubt. I it it just rubs me the wrong way. I still really enjoy this film, but there are some noticeable cracks that I think could have been easily patched over. For example, Chloe, it is established that her parents own the bar, and so that's why she's
Right.
able to use the keys to let everyone in during the curfew. Except, and I don't know if they established this somewhere else in the movie, I may have missed it, but curfew means that when sun goes down, and they show a little montage of people picking up their kids from school and, closing up shop, and then they all go home, and that's why the streets are deserted. That's why the trailers make it look like there's no one in the town. It all makes sense, except, are Chloe's parents out of town? Are they wondering why their daughter is not in the house for the curfew?
Yeah,
Let alone the other kids. I mean,
and the curfew was specifically used so they could bring back Red Right Hand again. Don't get me wrong, I love the song. But at the same time, I'm like, really, really? I'm like, okay. And the other thing is, it's a curfew in a town that has the cops, and the cops in this are probably the most inept cops out of all the Scream films, because here you have early on the chief police, whatever, the cop, main cop, Mark,
Mark, yeah.
his family gets attacked by a guy who poses as Ghostface. Yes, he gets run over, sure, by Gale in the van, but there's possibility that there's still, possibly some threat, but they don't put at least one cop car outside his house at some point.
Well,
And,
because Mark, they've all seen the other Scream movies. They know that doesn't work.
you know what I mean? There was no
Yeah.
cop car out there leading to this third act, which I think is probably what's the sticking point for a lot of people in this. And as I said at the opening of this, if you don't stick that landing, that an ending that's not really solid, even if the rest of the film is, it's going to stick with people. And I think that's
Yeah.
it, because Sydney makes it back to the house because she gets a call yet by Ghostface yet. Hey, you know what? Who you thought was not, and I've got your daughter, and it's back, where the heart is. And so she knows, she goes back home. There's no cop posted outside. Even if they could have put the cops outside and had them dead, at least it would have made sense. But there was nobody posted outside, much less during curfew. You think you'd have at least one patrol car or a couple patrol cars going around town, especially downtown, making sure everybody adheres to the curfew, but no one is there. And Tatum's running down the street yelling, help, help. And it's like, dude, there's a curfew. There's nobody around in the business district.
Well, I mean, but yeah, I mean, there wouldn't be. I mean, that's the thing that I like about this curfew thing is it's not like she's in a neighborhood and no one's helping her. The streets are deserted. Now,
Yeah,
there
I
is a
guess.
problem with the cops, and it's the
Mhm.
same problem with Gail Weathers, because at the end of the TV interview,
Right.
Sydney goes off to find Tatum, who is at the bar or the house or what.
Yeah.
Anyway, it leads to the big climax of the movie, but Gail's left behind in the news station, and I like that she's not involved in the big action climax. It's more Sydney and Tatum, because we've seen Gail do this for, however many movies now. But it also doesn't make any sense, because I think she tells the one anchor, the local guy, hey, call the cops, tell them that to get down to the bar. We don't see any cops until all of this is over. And Gail doesn't go down to the bar, packing a Glock or something like that. Like, where did everybody go? It's a giant problem. And again, it kind of feeds into this problem of the killer reveal. Now, I want to get to the aftermath of that reveal and the big fight at the end, because I thought that was pretty spectacular. But yeah, I'm surprised that Kevin Williamson wrote this, because he's also the person who kind of birthed the franchise. And Scream 1 is one of the smartest, tightest horror movies out there. There's a reason we're still talking about it 30 years later.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the reveal. I want to say the reveal is the weakest because of the way they set it up. They revealed to Ghostface like it was a surprise, and it wasn't. When we see Tatum knock out one Ghostface, you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden they slow-mo this Ghostface behind her. We're like, well, okay, we see where this is going, right? But then we reveal who, and it didn't make much sense. Now, what would have made sense is if it was the mom and her son. And while, yes, I know that has been done before necessarily, it would have made more sense because her son is a huge true crime guy, and he's a big Sydney Prescott guy. And throughout the film, they teased him being obsessed with Sydney Prescott.
And he wants to start a podcast.
He wants to start a true crime podcast.
He's got this big story living right next door, literally. Yeah.
Right. And so it would have made sense of him being pulled in with his mom, given they both share the history with, the abusive member of their family, the shared trauma, like you said, and it would kind of mirror a little more of the Sydney and Tatum dynamic, only a different way, in that these two embrace their shared trauma and end up becoming the Ghostface killers and going after Sydney because they think she has let them down. The mom, because she was motivated and she sees Sydney, she's like, wow, you're really a PTO type mom now. And him, because, hey, I want my, podcast and true crime and, wants to contribute to it. They could have done that dynamic. And while it was done before, it would have made more sense than random asylum guard.
No, I love your idea for that kind of parallel storytelling, the mirrors living again literally right next to each other. I think that would have been really cool. The one thing I did like about that mother-son dynamic, though, as it played out, was that kid got ruthlessly murdered, and it's unclear, I think, which of the ghost faces actually did that.
I think the guard guy did it. I think she got the guard guy to do it, but she didn't care because he was the offspring of her husband.
Yeah, and she said, he's the spitting image of her dad or something like that. And that's the thing, is he was awkward and, not very sociable, but there was no indication that he was abusive or a bad guy. So that very well could have, that's kind of even more tragic angle, is that was just her perception of her own son, and she didn't care if he lived or died. In fact, she kind of preferred that he didn't make it to the end of the picture. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. I also liked Sydney and Tatum's relationship as established early on in the film, where Sydney never talked to her daughter about the things that she experienced throughout her life, but Tatum knew all about it because of the book, the movies, the podcast, the social kind of commentary on her family, but she never got to hear mom's perspective on it. And Sydney kind of figured, well, all that stuff's out there, I don't need to talk about it. That was very interesting. I loved their little moment on the porch after the whole thing was over, and then the three survivor heroines walking away, that kind of thing. But I like the emotional climax of that movie. I thought it was great. But I also want to talk about, as we kind of wrap up here, the fight. Where I'm going to get her name because I keep calling her the crazy lady next door. I think that's kind of uncharitable. But it is Anna Camp, played Jessica Bowden. Now, the actress, she was from Pitch Perfect, I think, and a lot of
Mhm.
other
Yeah.
movies. She's great. I think she's really good in this movie. And as much as I don't like how they treated her character at the end, I think she did a really solid job of playing that unhinged,
Mhm.
domestic abuse survivor turned serial killer for some reason. But I thought that the fight was reminiscent of the Mrs. Voorhees wrestling match at the end of the first Friday the 13th,
Sure.
complete with the pounding the head into the floor. When Tatum and Sydney unload on her with the guns, it's all CGI and everything, but they completely destroy her face. And when they cut to the reverse angle of them like leaving, like, oh, she's dead, we can go home. They show the body, the face is gone, but there's like a little crater in the middle with
Yeah.
blood burbling up out of it. That looked practical. That was a really fun detail. And
Mhm.
yeah, again, this movie had me going for an hour and a half, and then it started losing me, and then it completely lost me, and then it kind of got me back. And now we're doing this podcast. I don't know what to think of Scream 7 anymore. I think I did not like Scream 5 at all.
Mhm.
Possibly I need to go back and watch it because it was introducing a brand new cast of characters that I just assumed they were all going to be dead meats, and I didn't know if they were going to
Right.
do future movies. But I really like Scream 6. So I think the way you fix Scream 7 is you pretend that Scream 5 never existed. You pretend Scream 6 was Scream 5, and this movie is Scream 6. Still doesn't fix it, but it gets rid of, at least we haven't seen the same story, the same
Right.
callbacks over and over for 7 movies. It's only been 6.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where I watched and it was fine, but I just felt like I was watching a lot of bits, especially when we get to the Ghostface stuff of stuff that it was in the previous films. And now that people might say, "Oh, that's hypocritical, Mark. You like the Fast and Furious films." I'm like, "Yeah, but each Fast and Furious film, they try to outdo themselves with the next biggest stunt, regardless of how ridiculous it is at sorts." And so while some parts feel familiar because you're going to get the slow-mo car party with all the scantily clad, good-looking young folks and the thumping bass, and yes, you're going to get that scene. And so Scream does have some of those moments. It was just there was so many of those callback moments in here that it felt like Williamson was resting a little bit too much on his laurels for me for this to hinge on, and especially considering what we went through in 6. I liked what was alluded to in 6, and that's where I kind of give it that's why I call it, in spirit of kind of the rise of Skywalker, the franchise, is just the fact of they were taking it in an interesting and new direction. They hinted at possibly going across the country a rampant suddenly following of Ghostface and people being copycats and such, and our two sisters just trying to get deal with this and end up possibly running into them. And yes, they had to make some choices, and it was great seeing Sydney back, but for me this felt a little too familiar to the other films to really get into it. And there were parts that I loved the Sydney and Tatum dynamic. I did really well. That was probably my favorite part of it. And seeing Gail and Sydney back together and interacting like they did, kind of what we saw in 4. And those were moments in here that I enjoyed. But in between that, I was just like, oh yeah, okay, here we go. you know?
Yeah, I think you're right. The horror slash kind of Scream self-referential stuff is definitely the weakest part of this movie. But I think the what they do with the adult characters and the entire Evans, that's Sydney's new last name,
Mhm.
their whole family dynamic I think is really cool and
Yeah.
says a lot about what this franchise not only means as a horror franchise, but what it means for the characters in universe to have gone through all of this. I think that's really neat and worth exploring. And it reminds me, it's something a bit different for Scream, and there is something odd. Not every horror franchise makes it to 7 entries,
No.
but there are 3 of them, and Scream is one of them where I think they take the 7th time to do something a bit different. And
Mhm.
here it's making this movie about something rather than just the kills and legacy revenge. in Friday the 13th Part 7, it was psychic, Tina versus Jason.
I love,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then, oh my gosh, I just had it and I lost it. There was another franchise that did something different. If I think about it, I'll interrupt myself and jump in. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot here to recommend, but only up to a certain point. Um, yeah, I don't know. So, kind of closing thoughts on Scream 7, Mark.
Well, I mean, you've given me a little bit more food for thought, but all thinking back on it again, I almost wanted a little bit less horror elements, which sound weird, but a little bit less of that and more of that dynamic that you're talking about, having little hints and stuff there of maybe those horror kills, but spending a little more time with the Prescott slash Evans family and seeing how that is dealing with it. Hell, get your horror elements in there with Sydney nightmares suddenly coming back. You have Woodsboro and the house burning down where all the events happening, sparking up old memories. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I think this would have been if they'd spent more time on the characters and had that interview scene between Sydney and Gail earlier in the film,
Mhm.
you could have really that was one of my disappointments is you introduce this great element of, oh my gosh, Gail is a real person and she's really been affected by the death of her,
Mhm.
beloved and also this crazy kind of crippling nerve damage. But then her movie stops right there
Yeah.
until she pops up at the end. If this had been her occasion to die at the end of this movie, the idea of like being reunited with Dewey or something like that, a moment of self-sacrifice because her life is all kind of messed up, see her more as a human being rather than the personality that she kind of has to put on. There really could have been something there. Before I forget, I remembered the other franchise, and I don't know how I forgot it because it relates back to Scream. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part
Yes.
7
Part
was
7.
also
Yes.
known as Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where
Nightmare.
they
Mhm.
took the franchise in the ultimate meta direction,
Right.
which was, Wes Craven directed the first Scream, and folks say that New Nightmare was kind of his impetus for like, hey,
Mhm.
what do these horror movies mean to people? Kids are constantly talking about them. What does it mean to be a teenager in a world of horror movies?
Right.
And what if they found themselves living in one? And that became Scream. That's why we're talking about it right now. The last thing I want to talk about is Matthew Lillard. I had
Yes.
a lot of fun watching him as Stu taunting Disney. I love that he had that kind of boomer thing of like whenever he shot the recording, you saw the finger go like
Yeah.
press the button. Um, but it also presents a huge problem because we established that he is AI. I understand how you can take like um, a mugshot, newspaper clippings, whatever from 1996, and say, okay, I want an image of this guy, age him up 30 years, and give him a bunch of facial scarring consistent with having a TV dropped in your head. And then you can come up with a realistic 3D AI
Mhm.
model to perform like a
Sure.
puppet. What I don't understand is 1996 was not 2026 or even 2006. People didn't live all their lives online. So people how did this supervisor at a mental institution know enough about what Stumacher sounded like, what his personality was like, what he would be like? It's great for Scream fans because we see Matthew Lillard back acting like a grown-up version of the little prick he was in high school, but there's no way this guy who orchestrated this could
Mhm.
have known to make a convincing enough Stu that Sydney would believe that maybe he's back from the dead.
Yeah, and that was one of the things where I was like, that was the question I had with it. I mean, on one hand, okay, making him look like it, sure, but the personality and everything for it, yeah, internet was around, but there weren't a lot of recordings. There weren't really recordings of Stu, as far as we know, that
And
he
even if
could
there
have.
were, they probably would have been home movies that his family, unless there was like a subplot of like, oh, his family sold this guy the tapes or something because he
Yeah.
ponied up, 3 months worth of salary to get this intimate look at their son. But yeah, it's not they didn't have vlogs and video diaries and all this other stuff, so it would have been pure speculation.
Yeah, it would have been. And that was one of the things where I was like, on one hand, I was hoping they wouldn't. On the other hand, when I saw him doing the recordings, I kind of did want it to be him, because I'm like, any other explanation of why it's not him now that you show him on video like 2 or 3 times, is going to be, in fact, that would have been the big reveal, is instead of it being asylum guard guy, it being Stu with the neighbor lady. You know, they met, say, at the asylum. You know what I mean? That would have made a little bit more cohesive sense at the end. And Joey, I think you do have a comment here. I did hear rumblings about original endings in the test audiences that they had.
Can I show this comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the comments.
No, you can show this one.
Okay, so Joe Murciani, Stu was alive in the original ending.
Mhm.
Test audiences didn't like it and preferred him dead. So he gave us the alternate ending. Morons, terrible decision. Agree, Joe. That was, man, they need to have like test audiences for test audiences.
Well, and here's the thing. If you're going to cut that ending and make it so it's not him, then leave any of his footage. You could cut around it or shoot around it, or just leave the scenes where he's actually doing the video foot out of it. You know, because when you hear that that's the original ending, those video clips of AI make a hell of a lot more sense. His demeanor, how he's acting, the location, how he's using the camera. You know, how AI uses the camera is how it's used when Sydney is going through the home and you see the footage of the other killers and it sweeps.
Yeah.
And that's how AI uses it for 99% of the people who don't have a huge amount of money for the actual, account. And yeah, while it is more realistic, for the footage that you get of Stu when he's doing the FaceTime with Sydney, I was like, okay, that's not, that AI, even that's pushing it even for today's AI capabilities of the camera angles and how he's swooping and everything. That's just, if he was doing that, it wouldn't be interactive. The fact that it was interactive with Sydney, then I could see. If it was just a playing a video, I could see, but he interacts with Sydney, and I'm just like, no, I almost would have rather had Stu be alive at the end, because at least that made more sense.
Well, you can, not necessarily with AI, but you can do that with deepfake technology.
Well, you could. True.
Yeah. But it's also, again, it goes back to, I don't buy the credentials of the person who allegedly masterminded this thing.
Right,
so
right.
everything else flies right out the window.
And that's the big thing is it. He wasn't a convincing enough character for you to go, oh yeah, I could see how he pulled that off. I'm like, no, if he pulled that off, he's doing other work. He's not working in an asylum to make ends meet.
Or if he is, he's like the director of the asylum. He's definitely not like the toady to the psycho, killer lady. That was a weird dynamic.
And in the end, with the way everything else in this movie is set up, you see it when you hear, oh yeah, Stu was originally going to be the actual killer at the end. Everything that leads up to it makes a hell of a lot more sense than what we end up getting for the reveal. And while I would think that it would be a little bit lazy, on the other hand, I would have accepted that more than the ending that we get, the reveal that we get for our killers. I would have accepted Stu a lot more. Would I have liked it better? I would be like, But I like Matthew Lillard, and they set it up at least enough explanations to it being a horror movie to you're like, we've had worse killers survive worse injuries and still come back. So yeah, sure. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest problem with it though, is that there are still enough conspiracy theories out there in universe that Stu Macher is alive, that does leave the door open for Scream 8. Because for various reasons that you kind of alluded to, they were going to try and do a new trilogy and a new ongoing series with the last group of characters. But there were some, controversial comments, so actresses left the project. tellingly, the other two characters, Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega's characters from Scream 5 and 6, they're not even mentioned in this
Mm-mm.
movie. They keep referencing back to New York and what
Work.
happened in New York. And but at the end of this film, it feels like all the characters have gotten sufficient closure that this could and should be the last Scream. But because it made $63 million this weekend,
And almost 100 million globally, like 98 or something globally, and 68 domestically. It's
I think I would not mind seeing another Scream film in like 10 years
Mhm.
and more of a soft reboot. I don't know where horror is going to be, but I mean, and hold on a second. This comment, I know I'll let you go here, Mark. We're kind of going over
No,
here, but
I'm not.
okay. Well, if you don't have to run, then I'll keep you here for another 6
I'm
hours.
good.
No,
I'm good. I'm
but
good.
but this leads into my next point. Erwin Curtis 4028 says, "I'm excited for the next Anna Faris scary movie." I am too. I saw the trailer for Scary Movie 6 and I laughed. I thought, this looks promising. It looks more in the irreverent vein of the original Scary Movie film. Um, but what I was getting ready to say is 10 years, I think, is good enough buffer for horror to go through a couple more cycles and have more things to ridicule, to mock, to play with in terms of constructing tropes that you could set up a new type of Scream movie, maybe even not connected to the Sydney Prescott legacy, except someone's got the Ghostface costume and that's it. New group of kids, new group of rules, and all that other stuff. They've kind of tried that within this series before, but this needs to go away for a while. They've had way too many Scream films in the last few years, and some of them are promising, and some of them are most definitely not. All right. Oh, wait, sorry. Oren also says, guys, views on Hoppers. Have not seen it yet. Mark, have you seen Hoppers?
No, not yet. It's coming out this week, I think.
I thought it came out last week.
I did not see it. No, I think it's this week because I saw like a fan event set up for
Oh, you know what? I think you're right because I
press
know someone who
screenings.
saw
I
it,
think.
and I know someone who saw it last weekend, and I think that was a press event. So I just
Yeah.
assumed, yeah, okay. So yeah, I haven't seen Hoppers yet. Joey says writing and execution and strong character development are important. The big reveal finale more so. They did the same thing with Halloween Ends. Original script was the kid becoming the new Michael, but audiences hated it, and they didn't do it. Directors should just not listen to what others think. It's ruining movies.
I've actually had that opinion way back because I'm old. Way back when Snakes on a Plane came out. It was hilarious because internet was still young. But on news boards and that, when the trailer for Snakes on a Plane came out and they had Samuel Jackson in it, someone made a fake trailer with him dropping F-bombs and made it as an R-rated trailer. And the internet blew up and said, why don't you have, you've got, and they ended up doing that. They ended up doing some reshoots, made it more fun, more campy, more R-rated with Sam Jackson. And it got a cult following because everybody's like, hooray. And so they listened to the internet, and that's where it was a good thing. But ever since then, I think producers take the wrong cues from the internet. We've seen it with Star Wars, because you and I both actually enjoy Last Jedi more so than most people, because we enjoyed at least what they were hinting at, where they were possibly going with it. And then producers listened to the internet and the fandom and completely changed their original plan because of that. And here with Scream as well, what they had planned, I wish they would have gone through with it, because again, while I would not have exactly cared for it as much, I think I would have enjoyed the film more because it would have made it a more cohesive story and made sense more with what they have in the movie than what we end up getting.
Yeah, I think, well, just to go back to the Star Wars thing, I think Last Jedi has some big flaws that I will admit that I overlook, like the slow motion space chase. I think is ridiculous, but I think in the context of like the scenes that are going on, I think it's kind of fun. My biggest problem with The Last Jedi is the Rise of Skywalker, because I said at the end of that movie, they have completely reset the table. They can go anywhere with this
Right.
story, and they chose to flush it down the toilet.
Take the path most traveled. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I want to say something about Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah.
Yes, they tinkered with it. They made it more hardcore and funny, but the movie also flopped.
Yes, it did.
So, and it's really funny. If anybody out there has the DVD or the Blu-ray of Snakes on a Plane, listen to the audio commentary because it was recorded the week before the film's opening. And you've got Sam Jackson. Literally, you can picture him kicking back because I think he's literally eating popcorn while he's doing the commentary, because the internet was so abuzz with how huge this movie was going to be that he was like, "Oh, this thing is going to be amazing and it's huge. This is the best thing I've ever done." Wow, it's a time capsule, all right. So I'm just saying the internet can be right in terms of artistry, just not necessarily box office. And
Sure.
I know it's
And
not fun to think about box office in terms of artistry, but the truth is, if you don't get enough butts and seats, you don't get to make art on that scale as much anymore.
oh, and I totally get that, and I have that understanding. It's just me as a fan, especially of some cheesy horror films. I thought it was great what they did with Snakes on a Plane. Totally
Yeah,
see why
I love that movie. Yeah, it's
you
fun.
know, and totally see why it didn't do well. You know, but bringing it back around to this, when you get into any franchise that is 7 films in, you really gotta approach things a little bit differently, because if you're just doing more of the same, it has less impact and resonance, because it just makes you kind of want to watch the other films beforehand.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And that's absolutely true. Unless you go something bold like Saw 3D. Anyway,
Yeah. Or like I said, with Fast and Furious, while it has similar elements, they always up like the stunts and the craziness. So even if the story reads similar, visually they're doing something even more crazy than the last film. So you're like, okay.
well, we've talked about this. I gave up on those movies a long time ago.
I know you did.
But I will say the thing that I appreciate, and something you brought up earlier,
Mm.
is I think you refer to yourself sort of as like a hypocrite for criticizing Scream for going back to the self-referential well.
Mhm.
You're like, well, I like the Fast and Furious movies. The key difference is in all of those movies, or at least the ones that I've seen, they don't sit around talking about the great days when they were street racers. What they
Yeah.
do in terms of like dredging up the tropes is like, we're just going to make things more and more ridiculous and fun and strange.
Yes.
And so their trope is doing something new, but it's also old because they do it every movie, but it's still new. It's like the Jackass
Right.
movies.
Yeah.
One thing I want to pull over real quick, because I keep promising to let you go, and I got to get off here because I got a long day tomorrow. But I also love talking to you, Mark. I want to just correct something. Justin Wise 420 jumped in with some comments. I think I'd mixed them up with Joey Merciani's comments, so I just wanted to straighten that out. But Justin also says the new Star Wars is more cinematic, but not as good. They didn't put much time in movies anymore. For example, Episode 3, the saber fights took months to master. Now they just swing at each other. I agree. I think I like the Rey Kylo fight in The Force Awakens in that woody, the woodland snow. That was really cool. But yeah, I agree. It's sad. Even the originals had better fights. Yep. Scream 8, Joy coming back. Scream 8 is going to have to pull out a miracle to win back half the audience. Another wasted opportunity with the legacy character Stu Macher. The other legacy cameos were wasted. Yeah, that was just all weird. That's why my favorite directors are, Justin says, the ones who refuse to use CGI. Practical effects are better at minimal CGI. They can be. It's like any other tool. It's how you yield it or wield it. I think the problem nowadays is the people who invest in the practical effects, they really know what it takes to pull that off, and they care. Not to say that CGI artists are lazy. I would never say that, but it does feel oftentimes when you're watching it that there's not as much care put into it. But that could also be because of budgets and studio production deadlines. Like, got to get this done. So it's like, okay, here's fast and cheap.
Yeah, it is fast and cheap. I don't think it's the CGI, couldn't make it look any better than practical. They can. We've seen it. There's some movies where it's CGI where you didn't realize there was CGI in there. The thing is, they took their time.
Yeah.
It's what you said is how, like you said, you'd love to see them wait some time for Scream 8. A lot of these movies, they're just cranking them out 18 months for a shooting schedule now for your average film. And there's no way you're going to get the quality that you did when these films took 3 years to make. I mean, look at Empire. 77 Star Wars came out. You didn't get Empire till 80. You didn't get Jedi till like 83. I mean, some time, take some extra beats, and they don't. And when they don't, the film ends up suffering for it.
And also, I think even more so than special effects and production is, take a year and a half to write a damn good screenplay. Because it doesn't matter how the Avatar movies, I think, are proof of this. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of millions of dollars you dump into something. If you're telling the same story 3 times, it's going to wear thin. Couple more comments here. 7 was better, and the 5 and 6 were good enough for me. Says Justin. Joey says The Abyss and Terminator 2 are some of the best CGI. Very interesting point, especially about Terminator 2, because I was thinking about this. Do you remember the twins, the security guard in the mental institution, the guy who got the coffee cup, and he was actually played by twins? He showed up on an episode of The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which I'm watching with my 8-year-old.
Sure.
But he was like a guest star, and I was geeking out. It's like, it's the guy from Terminator 2. And my 8-year-old's like, what is Terminator 2? Like, he hasn't seen it. But Terminator 2 had cutting edge special effects. But much like Jurassic Park a couple years later, they knew that it was better to blend things. So instead of saying, oh, we're going to do a 3D rendering of this security guard because we got to, make him a duplicate for the T-1000, they hired twins to play the part. And they even had like a really, of course, cheesy rubber, shaking body for when he gets stabbed through the eye and everything. But it's charming,
But it's still, they used two of them, just like they got innovative with taking out the chip out of Arnold's head. They actually used Linda Hamilton's sister for the reverse angle. Oh, you didn't know that? With the Terminator 2, where they're removing the chip and it's in the mirror?
I don't know if I knew that or not.
It's
I might
not
have
an actual.
It's
not an actual mirror. They've got Linda Hamilton and I think Arnold in the facing the camera, but they were able to get the shot because they had, I think it was her sister and a double or whatnot for the reverse shot, So so
maybe that'd be a fun challenge for movie studios. Is you get your budget and then you automatically get it cut in half on day one and say, okay, now you got to figure out, what are you gonna how are you gonna pull this off? You got to deliver, but maybe that cuts against the whole time and quality thing I was thinking earlier. But just the kind of run and gun spirit of like, okay, we got to pull this off. We have limited resources. What's the coolest way we can make it look as convincing as possible?
Right.
I think that would be the challenge. Okay, so I'm gonna skip one comment. Nope, that's not the one I want to look at.
There you go.
Look at Oppenheimer, the film, no CGI, but one of the best visual movies I've ever seen. Time makes perfect. I got my issues with Oppenheimer. The visuals are not one of them. Definitely Terminator was way ahead of its time. Yes, even the first one for sure. Didn't Terminator 2 actually pop of CGI first, or am I wrong?
Pop off CGI
pop
first.
Off. Okay, pop off. It was definitely one of the earliest adopters of CGI in that scale, I think.
It was on the scope. It was the scope of it. James Cameron really took it to limits.
Right. The Abyss was first. Sorry, Justin.
Right.
Yeah,
there was The Abyss and then Terminator 2. Things he did in The Abyss with the water was his walk so that the liquid metal T-1000 could run, basically. With those two, and those two, I think I honestly think those two are Cameron's best films, especially Abyss. I think Abyss and Terminator 2 are probably two of his best films. for me. And then I do enjoy Titanic too, don't get me wrong, but as far as experiences and wow factor, I think those two, because the wow factor is worked into the actual story. It's not just being done for wow factor, and that's what we run it into with Scream 7. You have Stu in here who ends up just being cameo wow factor, but doesn't actually play into the end, and it should have. I wish they wouldn't have listened to the test audiences, because at least it would have made more sense within the world of Scream to actually have Stu involved as one of the Ghostface killers.
On the one hand, I understand the impulse to not have him be it, because they go so far out of their way talking Stu Macher up before the first line of dialogue in the film. The podcast on the car radio as they're driving up, they're talking about it. I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. You want us to believe he's alive. Wow. Okay, last comment. Now I'm closing it down because I got to get out of here. But Joey Merciani says, even Tron was ahead of its time, to be fair. Yes, that's true. Although I think the key difference here is that, Tron did blend, like, it had the light cycle and the grid and all that stuff. In terms of the human animation, they were still like painting those, energy cells on people and everything. But I think what we're talking about is the blend of live action and CGI to the point where you believe that there's a liquid metal man like murdering someone on screen.
Man, when I saw that,
yeah, and it still kind of holds up today. Even the scene where he's like walking, the fire's reflected in him, and it's kind of like a dull sheen.
Yeah.
It's so much of that movie is so perfect. Okay, Justin Wise 420 is okay. That's crazy, to be honest. Especially the nuke scenes in the Terminator movies blew me away. Most real and disturbing destruction I've ever seen. Oh yeah, that opening scene of Terminator 2. Oh, wow. All right. Thank you, Mark, for joining me, for talking about this movie. I'm glad we enjoyed it. I just realized I didn't put up the Kicking the Seat banner. So how do people actually know what live stream they're watching? There it is.
There it is.
But anyway, I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck. What do you have coming up, sir?
For Special Mark Productions, I got a heavy weekend ahead of me. I'm going to the Midwest Weird Fest / a Night of Horror International Film Festival this weekend up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And 3 days, I've got 13 films I'll be watching at least, as well as a number of interviews with filmmakers who will show up there. I will cover as much as I can. So that's the big thing I've got coming up. Otherwise, I've got 3 or 4 reviews dropping this week over at our Special Mark Productions YouTube channel. One just dropped today, very interesting indie film called Obex, which was, I thought, actually a very creative film for the story that it was telling. And I love my indie stuff as well. And so you can catch it out over there. But we've got this month we're going to have a lot of reviews dropping.
Awesome. I'm surprised you're not doing reviews right now, because I don't know how you squeeze all that stuff into a 24-hour, 7-day week. But one last comment. Thank you, Justin Wise 420. I will subscribe and will tune in. I did not pay you to say that, but that is part of my outro. If you like this live stream, ladies and gentlemen, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications and all that business. Next week, we will be back talking about Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride, which looks to be Bonnie and Clyde meets The Bride of Frankenstein, starring Jesse Buckley and Christian Bale. Very interesting. I hope to catch it soon, and we'll be back talking about that in spoilerific detail. So, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We had some great comments and some lively discussion here. If you like Scream 7, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought of it. If you hated it, if you agree or disagree with anything we talked about here tonight, we'd love to hear from you. So thanks, everybody. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much, and take care.